You are listening to the E2C Network, where the Auburn family speaks.
We're go Auburn fans. Welcome to No Huddle, your source for Auburn football news and discussion. Part of the E2C Network. I'm AJ Richardson, and I'm also here with Jared Davis. We just had Auburn SEC Media Days. We had Brian Harsin, Derek Hall, Tank Bigsby, and John Samuel Schenker. Lots of great guys, lots of leaders that you've heard their names plenty of times. I love listening to all of them. I feel like they all kind of gave their own little insights into what's been going on over the last few weeks, months of this off season. Jared, what's kind of your overall impressions of the SEC Media Day in 2022 and kind of how they went?
I think it was pretty standard. Obviously, there was initial questions with, to Harsin about the offseason, and they kind of led with every player that went up there with that question. And I think they handled it well. Harsin, I didn't see this piece, but I think Harsin, day one, he kind of led with, that situation and then basically said, all right, we've moved on from it. So, all in all, that was the only out of ordinary piece, I guess. And yeah, so, it just kind of, to me, kicks off the fact that we're close to August, and that's the last month without football, and we'll have NFL preseason in August. So it's about to happen, man. I'm getting excited about it.
Yeah, I feel like the summer has been some things like, the league that happened up in Birmingham for football. I feel like there's been a taste of football, but honestly, I don't really care too much about that. I really just care mostly about SEC football and Auburn specifically. So to get SEC Media Days in, that was awesome. There was so much good stuff. I feel like we had kind of gone through, the drought of what to talk about, what's going on, to now we have lots of stuff. We have some really interesting stuff. Like, who knew the Kentucky quarterback likes to have coffee with mayo? Like, who the heck? Like, weird things like that you learn. And you're like, what?
I think I just threw up in my mouth. That's terrible. I didn't even hear that.
Yeah, some weird stuff like that you learn. There was also some, obviously, football talk that happened. But lots of good stuff. If you ever want to go watch some of that's on YouTube. But we're going to try to do a good job of, summarizing what happened specifically in relation to Auburn, what happened, the questions asked to Brian Harsin, Tank, Derek Hall, and Schenker. So let's start off with Harsin. Let's talk about what questions he was asked. Obviously, the investigation going on, he handled that pretty well. One of the other things that I thought was kind of interesting, and I think you noted this too, was around the kind of the negative attitudes of the players that, because of the transition from, a Gus Malzahn led team to now Brian Harsin of last season. I think a lot of those guys ended up leaving. And that's why we saw this big mass exodus. And Harsin kind of hinted at that. Was that kind of your impression of like those negative attitudes, negative people ended up leaving, so that now this team is bonded and has a positive vibe around it?
Yeah, no doubt. I mean, I was kind of surprised he went there, but I'm not mad he did. I mean, he basically essentially said there was some negative players on the team last year, and they're no longer on the team. So you can, we can either he's talking about people that graduated, went to the NFL, or transferred, and you got to assume transfer. So you can kind of do your research and figure out who he's talking about.
Yeah.
But, at the end of the day, if people are being negative, and, he did mention, not like occasionally, I think he basically said, something that's, it's always something and it's always someone else's fault. He's like, we got to get, we don't have that anymore. Everybody's on the same page, and that's a good thing because you got to have that. So yeah, he did hint at that, and I thought that was a pretty big statement.
Yeah. Another couple things that he started to discuss was around the defensive side of things with Schmedding. And it sounds like there's 100% trust between Schmedding and Harsin. Schmedding's doing his thing on defense. And I think that also kind of, brought up a little bit about, to me, what happened with Derek Mason. because Derek Mason ended up leaving and going to OK State for less money, and that seemed kind of weird. I mean, and now kind of looking back at it, maybe that was just kind of the way it was going to be, even maybe from the beginning. It's a 1-year deal with Mason, and then we're going to move on. But I don't know. Any thoughts on kind of the defensive side of things that Harsin was talking about?
Yeah, I mean, he said, correct me if I'm wrong, he basically said with Schmedding, he doesn't even worry about the defense. Like, he trusts that, Schmedding knows what's going on, and he's going to have everybody in the right position. And I think that's really the deal with all the coaches that have, been moved up to different roles. Whether it works or not, I don't know, but there's that trust factor there. And, it's not, I know we all talk, oh, well, he brought all his coaches. Well, if you were going to start a company and you had been successful at your other company, you would probably try to bring in some of those people, right?
Right.
So if you think about it from that perspective, it's not super weird. But yeah, you could definitely tell he has a major trust in Schmedding. One thing I thought was pretty cool is, because we're digging in deeper to who Brian Harsin is every time we hear him talk, because we don't know a lot about him. And, he kind of had a chance to probably knock Mason a little bit or not even mention him or praise him. And he actually praised him. And I thought that was pretty good. So he could have easily just ignored it. And he kind of got, teed up to say at least a negative thing. And he didn't. He said that, Mason's a great coach. And that, not a lot's going to change, honestly.
Yeah, no, I really was shocked about that because, he could have easily started bashing Mason for, running a lot of zone and that not working out well or whatever his, gripe with Mason was. But he didn't. He ended up, saying he did a great job. He managed the defensive side well. Like there were certain things that I feel like, it could have gone sideways pretty quickly. And he chose to take the high ground, which I think says, again, something about Harsin that, I know it's just a press conference, but, if he's saying that in front of us, hopefully there's no hard feelings against Mason for, moving on.
Well, and one other thing, too, real quick, because I know we've talked about this, at length, but there was a lot being said about Brian Harsin from the media, supposedly being leaked from the coaches, and without a doubt from the players that left. A lot of stuff that would be hard for me not to fire back at, and he never did. So, he has stuff on those people too, right? And and maybe not super bad, but he could have come back and said, no, here's really the reason you're not on the team anymore. And he didn't. It appears he took the high road there throughout the process. He kind of took all the negative towards him, and unless you can think of a situation, he knocked the boosters about that whole thing, and that's understandable. But from like going after people that have kind of attacked him, coach and player wise, he didn't do it.
Right, and no, I can't think of any moment where he started bashing a player. I think he just mentioned kind of general like, hey, negative players left, we're moving forward, that kind of thing, and I think that's the mentality you have to have. If you start focusing on the things in the past, that's not going to help you. I mean, think about the things in the past, figure out what you're going to change, move forward. And that's what he's been doing. One of a couple of the positions that he pointed out, which I thought were kind of, telling of where our team's at, that he said that he just pointed out were tight end and defensive back. I think, I feel like we knew tight ends were going to be good. Just, tons of leadership with Schenker and the other guys that have been on the team for a long time. But I was a little shocked about defensive back, just because last year defensive back wasn't necessarily our strength. It became better and better, don't get me wrong, but that wasn't our strength on defense. And I thought that was kind of telling that we're getting better in kind of the secondary. And we already know with Owen Papo at linebacker, we don't have to worry too much about the linebacker core. So I'll be interested to see what that kind of looks like with the defensive backs and cornerbacks.
He went out of his way, I think, twice during the off season here to praise the true freshman Wooden. It's his brother. He's a safety. I think.
Caleb Wooden.
Yeah.
Caleb,
he went out of his way twice, and Harsin, I gave him a little pat on the back a few moments ago, but he doesn't do a lot of praising his players in public, and for him to do that,
at least like individually,
and he probably does it as a coach, but publicly, I mean, he doesn't, if he says it, he means it, I guess is a better way I should say that.
Yeah.
So for him to do that, that's pretty big, and we got to keep in mind. I mean, we landed the best cornerback from JUCO and the best safety from JUCO.
Mm-hmm.
And we'll get into it probably, but Derek Hall said some other guys that were injured last year have gotten better, have gotten healthy. Jalen Simpson, I think Zion Puckett. So there's a chance there. There's going to be some some leadership there. Some of these guys have a chance to grow up because we lost who's the secondary guy we lost last year to the NFL? Roger McCreary.
Roger McCreary, yep.
Yeah, so he's moved on. So that's going to give a shot for like Jalen Simpson, those guys to show up and be leaders. So it will be interesting to see how they develop.
Yeah, most definitely. A couple other things just to round out our discussion with Harsin. He kind of went into depth, which I thought was pretty insightful about the quarterback battle and what he's looking for with the quarterback battle. Obviously, no quarterback has been decided at this point. At least we're not made aware of that. But he went through kind of his criteria for quarterback. And, I maybe had heard certain things over time, but it was kind of a cumulative list of what are the top criteria for quarterbacks. And I think this goes for really any level of quarterback. First, and he spent a ton of time on this, was toughness, mental and physical. And you think back to, our previous quarterback with Bo Nix. I think Bo Nix was a fantastic, tough quarterback. I mean, for goodness sakes, like he was out there on a broken ankle playing hard. And I think that toughness is a good characteristic for a quarterback because you're going to take some licks. You're going to get injured. You're going to not be 100% all the time. And that's kind of the place that a quarterback has to be at. I think the other aspect is the mental aspect that, maybe at times Bo Nix, we saw him kind of crack a little bit where, Seth Williams and him were kind of getting at it on the sidelines. That's a mental breakdown that I think, Harsin, probably looked at and said, hey, we need to fix this. You need to be more mentally, tough. And one of the cool things that kind of came out of this was Jimbo Fisher at Texas A&M was asked about, even Calzada. And one of the he talked about the toughness of Calzada and how, even he talked about how amazing that game against Auburn was for him because Calzada, had his shoulder pop out. He popped it back in, came back, played great despite being injured. And that's the kind of toughness that I'm really excited about potentially with Calzada. And you could even argue TJ Finley last year. I mean, coming in a place like Georgia State where we were about to lose to Georgia State, and even towards the end of the year, like TJ Finley wasn't 100%. He was kind of running around, hobbling a little bit. That's toughness. And that's the kind of piece that I definitely have started to appreciate more and more with the quarterback position. So, Jared, any other thoughts about kind of the quarterback battle and what Harsin said about that?
Yeah, I mean, I guess a little bit. I mean, I agree. He went into detail, and I don't think it's any surprise. That's his favorite position on the field. I think he likes to coach quarterbacks, and he mentioned Kellen Moore at Boise. He told a funny story for those of y'all that didn't see it. He had came up with this list, and AJ, did he call it preparation? Is that what it was? Do you remember?
Preparation.
Preparation, yep. And he puts it up on the board, and Kellen Moore, he's expecting this rah-rah moment. Kellen Moore just looks confused and kind of chuckles, and Harsin looks back up and realizes that whoever made the sign had misspelled preparation. So he told that story. That was pretty funny. But, yeah, I think toughness, he hit on that a lot. And what I thought was interesting, AJ, is I would have thought leadership, number one. Well, he goes through all of them, and you're like, is he going to mention leadership? And he said if you do 1, 2, and 3, leadership, you basically are allowed to have the leadership at that point.
Yeah.
So if you're tough, you prepare, your decision making good, you can then be a leader.
Right.
And so he put leadership as 4.
Right. Well, and I think that people think the leader is you come in, you're the rah-rah person. And I know there's a piece of that is always a part of it. But you don't get the respect, I think, from others unless you put in the other things like toughness, preparation, decision-making. If you don't do those right, you won't be a leader. And you won't be viewed as a leader, even if you think of yourself as one.
Yeah, there's talking and then there's leading. And for them to buy in, for people around you, they have to see you're tough. I'll be honest, I think I actually forgot the moment in the Auburn game. I was recalling, I think he got hurt in the Alabama game and came back in and literally threw a beautiful a go route that scored a touchdown that put him ahead, that may have finished the game off. So Calzada's definitely tough. TJ's tough, played with the injured foot. I don't think we're going to have a problem in that department at all. He did also mention, again, for those that didn't see it, he talked to someone who either trains or is connected with Russell Wilson, and he said that Russell's list is essentially the same, for what he wants of himself. So, it's not unique, but it's good that one of the better quarterbacks in the league also, follows the same pattern.
Yeah, absolutely. And those are just, good characteristics to have for a quarterback. But if you're going to be a leader out in life, I think those are also very important as well. And I think that was another thing that I thought was kind of interesting. He kind of approached it, and I feel like Harsin has approached coaching at Auburn, more, looking forward to the NFL, or, for a lot of these guys, they won't even go to the NFL. So it's he talked about professional development and what that looks like, even day to day, is he wants it to be a professional development every day of what are you going to do better today that you didn't do yesterday. And talking, and when I hear professional development, I think business terms, and that's something that's a little different that I hadn't really heard too much of from like a football standpoint. And I think that's a good point for a lot of these players is, what? Football is going to teach me a lot. I mean, I played high school football. High school football taught me a lot. And I'm sure these guys are learning a lot about themselves and how to, to succeed. And when they don't succeed, how do they get better from that? And those are the life, professional development moments that I think Harsin was talking about. So just thought that was kind of cool that he brought that up. One other comment about Harsin that I wanted to talk about is he had mentioned potentially playing multiple quarterbacks. And I was thinking about that could be really interesting to see somebody like a TJ Finley or Calzada, and then kind of a change of pace, Robbie Ashford. We saw him during the A-Day game go nuts, and that's even with him not having the non-contact jersey on where he couldn't get hit. And I'm thinking that would be awesome, to maybe in some red zone situations, something a little bit different for Robbie Ashford to come in there, make something happen. I feel like that could be a really cool little piece for Auburn.
Hey Auburn fans, I want to take a quick timeout from this episode to bring your attention to something very special. Here at the E2C Network, we pride ourselves on bringing you the best content for Auburn fans out there. And best of all, it's free to you. But just because it's free doesn't mean there aren't costs, especially when you have a library of hundreds of podcasts, videos, blogs, and more. Many of you have reached out and asked how you can support this network in the past. Well, now I have your answer. It's called the E2C Network Booster Club over at patreon.com/E2C Network. There you'll find a membership monthly reward system where you can sign up for as little as $1 and get different perks at different tiers. Some of those perks include things such as apparel, eligibility to join us on future podcasts, recognition as an E2C Network booster, exclusive communications, and bonus content that is available nowhere else. If you love this network and want to help us keep producing podcasts like this one, please head on over to patreon.com/E2C Network to join the E2C Network Booster Club. You can also get there by going to our website, e2cnetwork.com/support. Whether you decide to join or not, we are still so appreciative that you would support us by just listening and being here, because each and every one of you is part of our E2C Network family. Well, that's it. Timeout's over. Let's get back into the episode.
All right, let's talk about the other guys kind of collectively, what did you think of the guys that also talked that Auburn ended up bringing? So Derek Hall, Tank Bigsby, and John Samuel Schenker. What were kind of your overall impressions of how they approached the media and what they ended up talking about?
Yeah, I mean they're different players. Tank is definitely more direct with his answers, not as talkative, which is not a problem whatsoever. He didn't add a ton. I think he did kind of hint to the fact of he's gotten better, obviously, and I think somebody asked about maybe somebody saying he's one of the more improved players, which is pretty impressive because he rushed for 1,000 yards last year. So yeah, he addressed that. He was asked the question about, how likely was it that he was going to leave Auburn because there were rumors. He very politely essentially dodged that question and said that, he loves Auburn, and he's ready to go with the boys and made no hint that he has any problem with Auburn. So I think he's all bought in. I thought that interview was, pretty good, to the point. Derek Hall's a little more talkative. And he went into a little more detail. He said that he really likes the defense. He's not concerned at all. He's been impressed, I think, with the secondary and the linebacking group. He talked about how him and, Echo Leota are essentially like brothers. And talked about how Dylan Brooks, people ask, well, where's he at? Well, he said he's really come along. His body's in good shape.
Yeah, he was. I think Dylan was the first one out of his mouth who's going to make an impact this year, besides you and Eku.
Yep.
And it was Dylan Brooks. So
Dylan Brooks.
I think that's pretty cool for a guy who didn't play at all last year as a freshman, now as a redshirt freshman. I think that says a lot about. We're probably going to hear Dylan Brooks' name, over the loudspeakers a few times.
Yeah, and for people that don't remember, Dylan was a 4, maybe 5-star by some people. He was the guy that I think was initially committed to Tennessee, and we had to wait a while to get them to release him, and they did. So, he chose Auburn. The one interesting thing about Derek Hall, he, after the Alabama game, told his mom he was going to go to the NFL. And then he essentially said, I just, kept hanging around Auburn and just realized how much I love the place. And I want to get my degree. And, I can go do other things the rest of my life. This will be my last time being able to be at Auburn. Yeah. And so he decided to stay and come back. They all talked about how the environment is just amazing there. Hall used the word, it gives him chills when he walks out.
Yeah.
So.
Well, and what was kind of cool, specifically Jordan Hare was brought up multiple times, and not just by Auburn players. It was, Georgia players, bringing up how amazing the environment was. Others as well. And I think that says a lot. I mean, Jordan Hare, I think, does get a good amount of respect, but, others look at, the 100,000 plus stadiums of Alabama and Texas A&M, and they're thinking that's awesome. But, Auburn with only 87,000, not so great. But if you ask players, there is a specific, almost just like a respect that a lot of these players have for coming into Jordan Hare. And there were Auburn players were talking about, we need to do a better job because we have that awesome environment of winning in that environment and winning at home. And I think there's a definite need for that. There were times, obviously, I'm thinking back to the Iron Bowl, where we could have won. We should have won. And that was a key piece of our environment that was just electric, and yet we weren't able to capitalize off that. And that's unfortunate. I hope the players, take that to heart and use that home field advantage even more this next coming year. Because if so, we start out 5 games at home, we could be 5-0 if they take advantage of that.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, I've had for many years, I've had Georgia friends tell me that, that's the loudest environment they've ever been in. And like you said, there's bigger stadiums. I've been to Tennessee and I've been to Florida, and I'll tell you, the game I went to, Florida was the loudest I've ever been in, but Auburn is probably second, from what from the games I've been to. So, it's fantastic. And yeah, we got to use it. You're right. Five home games, and they're 5 winnable games. I know people are loving on Penn State. People love on Penn State every year because they like Franklin. But listen,
but you look at what happened with Penn State last year.
Yeah, they didn't finish well.
Yeah,
that's a winnable game. I'm not trying to say we're going to win a national title, but you got Mercer, San Jose State. I don't remember the other one. Penn State and LSU. LSU is not in any better personnel position than we are. They have a brand new coach. It's at home. Essentially, they probably are a worse team than last year's team from a leadership because they always lose players in the NFL. So, But the final guy, real quick, and then I'll let you give me your take on what you thought about the guys. John Samuel Shanker, he was a little more talkative.
Yeah.
But he talked about everybody's come together. He was one of the vocal guys when the whole thing went down with Harsin, him and Derek Hall. He said that, people have come together. It gave him a chance to be a leader. I didn't hear him say why he decided to come back. Maybe he did. He said that strength and development, what they got going on there, he's like the players are really, you can see the growth in a lot of the players, especially even going into year 2. And just talks about how Keesal and Harsin are on the same page, and that wasn't always the case previously. So
I thought that was telling.
Yeah. I mean, he
he
say what he said. What did he say, AJ? You go ahead.
He straight up, he called out Bobo.
Yeah.
And I think that's, pretty bold of him to call out his previous, offensive coordinator. But I mean, the way he worded it was Bobo's an alpha. He's a head coach previously. Yeah, I think there is something to be said for, that. But you also look at the flip side of it. Guys like Derek Mason last year, he was a head coach at Vandy. Like he had to, you almost have to put your head coach hat off and say, I've got my offense. I want to, help out the team as a whole. But ultimately, I still, my manager per se is the head coach. His say is kind of final. And I think that's kind of interesting because, there's kind of rumors going around that John Samuel or that other offensive players were noting that practices had to stop because, Bobo and Harsin weren't on the same page about things. And I don't think we're going to have a problem with that based on what John Samuel Shanker and the others were kind of saying about the offense. And I think that says a lot because how many times, Jared, last year after games, we'd be like, it just felt like we weren't on the same page on offense. Well, guess what?
We weren't.
We weren't. The offensive coordinator and head coach were not on the same page about what we're trying to do.
All right.
No wonder.
Okay, so knowing that they were not on the same page, Harsin did the right thing, and maybe it was his call. I still want somebody to tell me that Penn State play on 4th down, was it meant to be a fade route? Because that's a terrible call. Harsin came out and was like, I approved it or whatever. I don't know, man. Knowing what I know now.
Yeah.
Because there was so many times that if you just hand the ball to Tank, you probably win the ball game.
Yeah, a 3rd and 1 or 3rd and 2, 4th and 1, something like that.
We're throwing fade routes to a guy. No offense to Kobe Hudson, but he's not the tallest dude. Like why are you throwing a?
Yeah.
Like if you're going to throw a fade route, throw it to somebody a little taller. But
yeah,
that was very telling. I mean, he I think almost verbatim said Bobo is an alpha because he was a head coach. That created communication issues on the practice field.
Yeah.
He also said something about another coach.
Wow. I mean, Shinker was like dropping some little bombs here, and I was like, wow, this is probably the best interview I've heard all day.
Let's go ahead and preface this. We love the guy he said something about.
Yeah.
And these are not our words. But go ahead, AJ. What was the other thing he said?
Yeah, so he was asked about, what's the difference between, the coaching staffs of Malzahn and now Harsin. And he talked about Malzahn kind of, in a good way. He's like, hey, he's a player's coach. And then, Harsin's more of a X and O's. I want to get things done on the football field. And he also mentioned about Malzahn. This was kind of a little bit of interesting, maybe a little bit of insight into maybe where it went wrong for Malzahn kind of on the football team was, he was called a player's coach, but almost to like a little bit of a detriment to him. And I was thinking, interesting. Like, everybody usually praises like, oh, you're a player's coach. And arguably, there's very few games where I was like, under Gus Malzahn that, the players stopped playing for him, if any. And I think there's something to be said for that. But if you want to win championships and you want to go all the way, maybe a player's coach isn't, the best thing for them. I don't know.
We're not smart enough, no offense. I'm not smart enough, I'll say it that way, from an X's and O's college football level to know what's the best plan or what I would even do. I did find it interesting that he did say Malzahn was a player's coach and sometimes to a fault. And, but people have bashed Harsin for not being enough of that, right? Like, not being open enough with his players. And I think there's a good middle ground. I do think, not Malzahn, I think from NFL down to college, if you are really only a player's coach, you have to have that ability to have the tough conversations because it is not always going right.
Right.
And coach and players do not know best the majority of the time, okay, because they haven't been around to see enough. It's nothing about the players. The coaches have just seen 20 years more of what they're seeing, right?
And that's why you pay the coaches so much, because they have that bigger vision. They've seen more stuff than a 18 to 22-year-old.
Right. And I think we all forget this too. Coaches want to win. So we're always talking about, why are they doing this and that? Well, I don't know, with these big buyouts, maybe they don't want to win, but coaches want to win, right? So they know a lot. They've seen a lot. And Malzahn's method worked pretty good. I mean, we can't forget how well he did at Auburn. So, but I thought that was an interesting comment.
Yeah, definitely. I was taken a little bit aback, but and I think Schenker has the respect for Malzahn. It was just he's seeing the difference, and he did stick around for another year. He's buying into Harsin's mentality of how a team should work, and to Harsin's credit, he has had lots of success in the way that he's done it at Boise, and now he's bringing that to Auburn. I mean, that's honestly a pretty smart move if you have a successful system. All right, a couple other things just to kind of wrap things up. A look around the SEC, there were lots of kind of interesting storylines that came up. We've mentioned a couple. Will Levis, the quarterback from Kentucky, putting mayo in his coffee, like that still grosses me out. What the heck? Georgia was asked or Kirby Smart from Georgia was asked about NIL, and he was saying, I don't think football players should be paid more than $10,000 a month, which would work out to what, $120,000 if you get paid that every month. And then literally 2 days later, Kirby signs an extension or a contract that now pays him $900,000 a month. $900,000. 90 times more than what he was saying his players should be paid. So I just think that's a little ironic. And I know players, there's a place for a coach and there's a place for the players to get paid. But I just think that's kind of funny. Literally 90 times more than what his players, what he thinks players should get paid. Anyways.
Yeah. I could do a whole separate podcast on that.
Yeah. So anyway, also in the last week, Tennessee, we knew about, Jeremy Pruitt, giving money out. But officially there was, NCAA violations, I think 16 or 18, somewhere around there, violations that were documented and they're going to get charged with. So bad things happening at Kentucky or Tennessee. So, I wouldn't want to be a Tennessee fan in the last, 20 years? Or, yeah, probably 20 years. It's been a long time since the Peyton Mannings of the world.
It's been a while.
Yeah.
It's been a while.
Yeah, I mean, specifically with that, I mean, I was just thinking back to, him handing out money, literally in McDonald's, sacks to players. And I'm thinking he's a head coach. Like, he's got to have done that before, right? Like, am I going crazy? Like, I feel like you wouldn't do that.
Whoa, now.
If you hadn't, practiced that.
I know where you're going with this. You're saying
I'm leading down a path.
Are you saying that he probably was doing things he was taught?
I would guess so.
Okay. Well, I mean, sure. Most of the times when you go places and you're doing something, you typically were taught that. Yeah, and so he's coached at a couple of places. He's coached under a couple of SEC current coaches.
Yeah, that one of them is considered the greatest coach of all time. So I'll let you figure out who I'm alluding to. Yeah. You can also go look at his Wikipedia and look at where he's coached before and figure it out. But I'll leave that out.
Wait a minute. Did he coach under 3? Did he coach at Georgia as well? Was he under Kirby at 1 year?
I'm going to look it up right now.
I'm not sure. He was under Jimbo FSU, I do believe.
Yeah.
He went to Georgia. Maybe he was still Mark Rick at that time. And then he went to Bama. I'm not sure. But, yeah, I mean, look. Yeah. And I think everybody has done things in the past. I don't have essentially, though, a lot of fan bases don't think that happens at their respective universities.
Yeah. Well, he did. Yeah, you're right. So Georgia 14 to 2015.
So that was Mark Rick. Okay.
Yeah. So it's possible. And then even back, defensive back coach at Bama 2010 to 2012. Again, still dating back to, the days under Saban. So you can make some assumptions there. I'll let you make those.
Look, we can only take people at their word. Saban came out and knocked Texas A&M and said that Alabama has never paid to get a player to sign with them. So
yeah, and then you can look at other coaches that were like, I'm not leaving, and literally the next day they sign a ridiculous contract to go somewhere else, and you're like, whatever. Like,
yeah, man, we could do a whole other podcast on this.
Yeah. Anyway.
Yeah.
One other funny thing, Vanderbilt, Clark Lee, their head coach, he said, and I quote, "Given time, Vanderbilt football will be the best in the country." I can't even take it seriously.
Look, I like the guy's enthusiasm. And here's the deal. In the new NIL era, there's a lot of Vanderbilt grads with a lot of money.
So that's true. There are lots of doctors and lawyers and smart people out there, but
maybe he's literally banking on that coming through for them.
That made me chuckle.
It's a cool town. If they didn't have the academic restrictions, he could be right. They probably got a lot of rich alumni. It's a really cool town. But yeah, unfortunately, I'm not probably graduating from Vanderbilt because I'm not smart. You got to be smart.
Yeah, definitely. All right, Jared, before we get out of here, how can the people stay in touch with you?
You can just find me on Facebook under my name, Jared Davis.
And you can find me on Twitter at AJYJY_. It's always great to be an Auburn Tiger and War Eagle.
War Eagle.
Thank you for tuning in to today's episode on the E2C Network. On your way out, I want to remind you to stop by e2cnetwork.com. It's your one-stop shop for all our content across our podcast, YouTube channel, and much more. To stay up to date with us, make sure you're following social media accounts such as Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. While our content here may always be Auburn sports heavy, if it's orange and blue, it's what we do. War Eagle.